This is the Chinese newspaper. It has been called the Chinese newspaper by some. And we're talking about the trust agreement. The trust agreement was signed March the 2nd, 1964. It was recorded at book 6953, page 519 to start. Now, in the trust it says, this trust may be referred to as the Golden Rain Foundation Trust. May. This is a business trust. A business trust is an agreement set up for the control and management of assets and property. This type of trust has trustees who take responsibility for the management of the assets in the trust. And the trustees manage the assets not for their own gain or benefit, but for the benefit of one or more trustors and beneficiaries. So why was the trust established? The trust was established to meet requirements to finance a project to be known as Leisure World Laguna Hills. So I'm going to give you a little background to better understand why the trust was necessary. The federal government passed the National Housing Act and created the Federal Housing Agency, FHA, to administer Section 213 as an indirect way of stimulating the economy. This was done in 1934. Section 213 guaranteed mortgage financing at low interest rates for housing that met FHA specifications and conditions. Banks and other lenders were the mortgagees who actually provided the funding. Funding. Okay, this is Moulton Ranch circa 1960, and as land in the cities and suburbs became more scarce and more expensive, developers moved further out into rural areas. And Rossmore Corporation was a community development company headed by Ross Cortese. In the 1960s, Cortese negotiated the purchase of some Moulton Ranch land to build a large-scale community, and you saw the picture of what he bought, okay? So Rossmore needed capital to purchase the land, develop it, and construct the facilities. The acquisition of the property and the construction of improvements would be financed by the sale of stock of cooperatives and mortgage loans insured by the Federal Housing Authority. The Golden Rain Foundation, GRF, of Laguna Hills was incorporated in 1962 to provide services and community facilities to the housing corporations of Laguna Hills. The incorporating and early directors of GRF were employees of Cortese. The first resident was elected to GRF board in 1966. The trust agreement was created with the GRF board as trustee and a not yet member-occupied Mutual One as the member and trustor beneficiary. Golden Rain Foundation of Laguna Hills, I went backwards, sorry. None of the lenders would have funded the development, and FHA wouldn't have insured the loans without a mechanism to ensure the future development and management of the trust properties and services. In essence, the GRF Trust is a construction contract to meet the demands of United California Bank, a mortgagee, assuring that specific community facilities and off-site improvements would be acquired, built, managed, and operated by GRF as trustee for the benefit of the mutuals who are the trustors. There are three major parts of the trust. The agreement that actually sets up the trust, Exhibit B, which states the terms of the trust, Exhibit C, or as amended, Exhibit 3, which was the regulatory agreement between GRF and the FHA. So who owns the trust? The trust is wholly owned by the mutuals. It is an asset of the mutuals. The Golden Rain Foundation does not own the trust. GRF manages the trust assets for the benefit of the mutuals. GRF has a dual role. As a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation, they were incorporated November the 19th, 1962, and they're regulated by the Corporations Code. The corporate members are the voting members, and resident members do not have a vote. Statutes and bylaws establish the rules by which the corporation will be run. Bylaws usually set forth how members vote for the board of directors, the number and term limits of members of the board of directors, the duties of the board, the duties of the officers, meeting requirements, and other incidental provisions. As trustee, the trust agreement, it was signed March the 2nd, 1964. It is regulated by probate code. Mutuals are the trustors as well as the beneficiaries of the trust. The trust agreement specifies the purpose of the trust along with the terms and conditions by which the assets are to be managed and ultimately distributed to the beneficiaries. All affected parties and the courts are legally bound by the provisions of the trust agreement. Now, the mutuals also have a dual role. As trustors, the mutuals have provided all the funding to acquire or construct the planned community facilities or off-site improvements. They are also the beneficiaries. The mutual provide continuing funding to pay for the expenses of the trustee in administering and operating the trust. The trust estate includes all trust deed sums received from the mutuals to become trustors and beneficiaries, all parcels of land and all improvements acquired or constructed, all sums paid to the trustee by the mutuals to cover costs of maintenance of the improvements, any other money or property held by or received in trust. So let's look at some of the highlights of the trust agreement. The trustee's duties are to perform all acts contemplated, necessary, or desirable to carry out the plan of operations of the trust agreement, provide annual financial reports to the mutuals detailing the trustee's operations, and retain all funds that are part of the trust estate in a separate bank account. Trustees shall have, in addition to all powers, rights, and privileges provided by law for trustees, all powers necessary to carry out the duties imposed on trustee by the trust, and in all such cases, trustees shall have sole discretion. With respect to all such transactions, trustees shall have no liability except for willful and wrongful misconduct. The trust shall terminate 60 years from the date March 2nd, 1964, or 21 years after the death of specific named individuals. Their birth dates were from 1954 to 1963. At the time, they were babies. Project, when completed, will contain an estimated total of 18,000 dwelling units. And specific improvements and community facilities were listed. Other projects could become a trustor. Remember, Mutual One was the only one that signed this agreement. Other ones could become a trustor and beneficiary by adopting and agreeing to the terms of the trust and depositing trust deed sums. In the event a project was not financed by FHA, because FHA had very specific conditions, GRF would determine the amount of trust deed sums. The trust deed sums varied per mutual from $600 to $5,230. As a result, the beneficial interest or percentage of ownership that each mutual has is not in direct proportion to the size of its membership. United put in 58.5%. Third, 39.2%. Mutual 50, 2.3%. That's how it added up. The 5,230 were some of the last homes that were, units that were built in Third. Let's look at some specific terms in Exhibit B as amended. Number 2, I should tell you the first term related to trust deed sums and how they were to be deposited and how they were to be spent. Number 2, it is specifically understood and agreed that completion of all the improvements as planned is dependent upon the development of Leisure World being fully completed, and Golden Rain Foundation shall not be obligated to construct the improvements to a greater extent than required by the actual development of Leisure World, or to expend thereon any more money than it receives from time to time in trust as provided in paragraph 1 hereof. And that was the instructions for the trustee sums. Number 3, in the event Leisure World is not fully developed, the improvements will of necessity be proportionally reduced. Number 4, no cooperative shall be obligated to pay for improvements more than its respective increment contributed to said trust. Number 5, Golden Rain in its said capacity as trustee shall maintain the improvements and the grounds and equipment in good repair. Number 6, Golden Rain shall operate and manage the improvements and provide administrative, recreational, and medical services for the benefit of the members of the cooperatives and their successors in interest at cost and on a non-profit basis. The cost shall be included in the monthly, and it said carrying charges, but assessments is what we usually call it now, charged on a pro rata basis to the members by their respective mutuals. Mutuals is replacing cooperatives if you want to be kind of word for word. Number 7, GRF at its discretion, shall refund credit to the members of the cooperatives their proportionate share of sums in excess of the amount expended or obligated after the end of each fiscal year. It's at their discretion. Number 8, in its sole discretion, GRF shall determine the rules and regulations relative to the use of the community facilities and the extent of services to be provided in connection with them. Use of any facilities by non-members shall be subject to the prior written consent of 2/3 voting power of GRF. That hasn't happened yet. Number 10, within 90 days following the end of each fiscal year, GRF shall furnish the cooperatives with a complete annual financial report prepared and certified by a public accountant or CPA and based upon examination of its books and records. That's called a KPMG audit. Number 11, any cooperative other than Mutual One may become a party to the agreement upon the execution of an addendum by supplementing Exhibit 1 and by performing all other duties subject to the conditions and restrictions as an original party to the agreement. Addendum 1 is an identification of the property, and Addendum 1 is a signed agreement. Exhibit 1 is the legal definition of the property. Number 13, Exhibit B is not intended to end and does not diminish any obligations imposed on GRF by the regulatory agreement. Now, the regulatory agreement terminated when the final FHA insured mortgage was paid. In the event of conflict between amended Exhibit B and the regulatory agreement, Exhibit C is also number 3 because it was amended. The regulatory agreement will prevail, but it's no longer in effect. In the event of conflict between the amended Exhibit B and the trust agreement, the terms of amended Exhibit B shall prevail. The trust agreement was signed in March the 2nd, 1964, and the amended Exhibit B was signed March the 30th. Schedule C is a list of community facilities planned for the 18,000 dwelling units. And only 12,736 units were constructed and no additional units are planned. So this is the Exhibit 2, or Schedule C, the estimated costs of community facilities. Gee, don't we wish? Don't we wish? All righty. Now, we talked about amendments to the trust. Trustee may not unilaterally alter, modify, or amend the trust, except if required by federal, state, or local governmental agency. The trust may be altered, modified, or amended by written instrument executed by the trustee and all beneficiaries of the trust, all the mutuals, corporate members. So we had 4 amendments to the trust, and here they are. March the 30th, we amended Exhibit B by adding paragraphs 6, 7, 8, and 13. February the 1st, we amended Exhibit C, the regulatory agreement between GRF and FHA, and then it was renamed Exhibit 3. On October the 4th, 1968, we amended it to include the condominiums. And then we canceled and superseded that amendment on September the 29th. And we put those provisions into that amendment. And we amended paragraph 8 of Exhibit B to specify that non-members could not use any facilities without prior written consent of the cooperatives exercising 2/3 of the voting power of the trustors. Termination of the trust. The trust may be terminated at any time by written election delivered to trustee of all the beneficiaries of the trust. Promptly following the termination of this trust, the trustee shall render an accounting to each of the beneficiaries and shall distribute the trust estate subject to any debts or other obligations to the beneficiaries in the form of undivided interest proportional to their respective trust deed sums. So some questions need to be answered. Where does GRF as trustee get the authority to continue adding community facilities and improvements? If you look at Exhibit B, terms 2, 3, and 4, it limits that. What gives GRF any authority to perform services in mutual common areas? Their duty was administrative and recreational and medical services we don't have anymore. And you can look that up on Exhibit B, term 6. Should the corporate members give GRF consent to allow non-members to use trust facilities? And is there a termination date, or is it not intended to end? The trust agreement says that there's a termination date, and Exhibit B, term 13, says not intended to end. Can the mutuals be co-trustees? And when and how should the trust be amended? And you can read the original documents on the Laguna Woods Village website under GRF General Information Governing Docs. Or you can go to the Residents' Voice website, and you can also go to the Association of Co-ops and Condos website. And if you want to see it, got it here too. Thank you.
I have a suggestion. I know quite a few may have questions. Now, because I just consult with Mike, his talk will also have trust. So why don't we listen to Mike's presentation, because we're right on time now. And then we can combine the two. And when you ask questions, we'll give you plenty of time. And you can direct either to Mary or to Mike, okay? So hold your question. If you need paper, we'll give you paper, you can write it down. Yeah, because Mike may have answers to your questions. I did miss something. I want Mary come back here. I forgot to introduce her, okay? But I'm not going to because everybody knows her. I just want to ask her, how long have you lived here? Just some general information like why do you want to serve the public? And if you want to tell somebody in your own words, answer the criticism or your own thoughts about your life here and your mission and so forth. Give us a little thing that people generally don't quite know you about, okay? This is your time.
Okay, what they don't know about me. I'll tell you what you don't know about me. You don't know that I've been a professional clown, and I was a member of the World Clown Association. Did you know that? Do you know I work on a pyro team? I do the fireworks up at Big Bear every year for the last 13 years. See, I cause fireworks wherever I go. I moved in here in September 1995.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm getting old. I used to be one of the youngies, now I'm one of the middles. I have worked on community activities since I moved in here. I've worked with the city. I've been chairman of the Social and Health Services Subcommittee. And I've also been chairman of the Public Safety Committee for the city. I've been on the board of the California Club. Yay! Did the decorations. I've also been president and treasurer of United. What else do you want to know? Now I'm on the GR board. Whee! Why am I doing this? I must be crazy. No, I've done community service all my life, so this is just normal.
So, you know, in other words, we're so happy she's doing this, right? Give her a round of applause.